I went back to Maplewood about a month ago. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. I was a freelance journalist looking for quirky local legends to write about. I thought it would be fun, maybe a little silly. I didn't think it would lead me down a dark path. I rented my grandmother's old cabin. It was cozy, but also a bit haunted by memories. I knew the town must have changed since I was a kid. The first place I went was the general store. Mrs. Holloway still owned it. When I walked in, she smiled at me. But as I talked to her, I noticed her voice shook a little. "You know the lake, don't you?" she asked. "There's stories about it." She leaned in and whispered about a shadowy figure. I chuckled nervously. "It's just a story, right?" I asked. Her gaze held mine for too long, like she expected me to know better. The next day, I decided to find the lake. I drove down those winding roads, fog wrapping around the trees. When I parked my car and walked towards the water, I felt something heavy in the air. Maybe it was just my nerves, but it felt different. The lake was dark and murky. I swear I saw something moving beneath the surface, but I shrugged it off. Then, as I turned, I felt it, the sensation of being watched. I looked around, but the place was empty and quiet. I tried to shake it off, but it lingered. As the days passed, I heard more stories. A man named Bob told me about kids disappearing near the lake years ago. A few decades back, it was a real problem, he said. His hands trembled a little. I tried to act casual. "That's all in the past," I said, but even I didn't believe my own words. I had trouble sleeping that night. I kept thinking I saw shadows flicker outside my cabin. Each time I felt my skin crawl. Part of me wanted to leave, but the stories kept pulling me in deeper. I had to know more. Then, one evening, right as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the lake. It looked human, but it felt wrong. I was frozen, heart racing. Before I could think, it vanished. I took a shaky step towards the water. Just as I did, a whisper reached my ear. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but there was nobody. I couldn't shake the feeling. I fought the urge to run, but I just had to know what was happening. I moved back towards the lake, adrenaline pumping in my veins. What was lurking beneath? Suddenly, the figure was back at the edge of the water. Its outline was clearer now. I blinked, but it didn't disappear this time. It stood, watching me. Panic flooded my mind. I turned to run, but something grabbed my ankle. I fell hard, hitting the ground. I didn't look back. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted towards my car. The darkness of the lake swallowed any sounds around me. All I could hear was my breath. I almost reached the car when I felt it again, the weight of being watched, and the whisper came back, chilling me to my core. I never went back to that lake. I left Maplewood and never looked back. But the stories? They linger, haunting me even now. The drive back home felt endless. My mind reeled with the chilling memory of the figure by the lake. I didn't want to go home, not yet. I decided to stop at a diner I had passed on my way into Maplewood. It was a small, run-down place, but I needed coffee and somewhere to gather my thoughts. Inside, the air smelled like bacon and old linoleum. A few straggly locals sat at the counter, nursing greasy plates. I slid into a booth, hoping to blend in. But I couldn't escape the gnawing sense of dread. Every time the bell above the door jingled, I turned, half expecting that figure to walk in. I ordered a coffee and tried to act normal. The waitress was friendly enough, but kept glancing at me, her brows furrowed. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. I hesitated. "Just passing through," I said, keeping it vague. She studied me for a moment, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "If you're looking for stories, you should talk to old man Jeb. He's got the tale about the lake, the real one." My heart raced. I almost spilled my coffee. "What do you mean?" I pressed, feeling the weight of her words. She glanced around, then whispered, "He lost his son near there a long time ago. He won't say much, but he knows something." I wanted to leave, to run. Instead, I asked her for directions. Part of me thought maybe I could find some closure. If I learned the truth, maybe the shadows would finally let me go. When I arrived at Jeb's small, rundown house, it felt like stepping into a different time. The lawn was overgrown and the paint was peeling. I knocked on the door. It creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a weathered face. His eyes searched mine, and I instantly felt an underlying fear in his gaze. "Come in," he muttered, almost reluctantly. The inside was dimly lit, filled with dusty pictures and memorabilia. It felt heavy, as if the room had absorbed years of sorrow. I told Jeb why I was there, about my interest in the lake and the stories I had heard.
He sat back, studying me, and I could see the conflict in his features. "The lake isn't just a place for fishing," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "It takes things. People vanish, and the wire doesn't care." He paused. "I lost my boy there." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I managed to ask. He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected someone to step in. "They say a darkness seeps from that water. People and things get drawn to it. My son was one of them." Shock coursed through me. I wanted to comfort him, but the tale felt too heavy to bear. "Did you see what took him?" Jeb's eyes clouded. "I didn't see him taken, but I know it was something unnatural, something that shouldn't exist." The room felt colder. I could swear I heard faint whispers echoing through the walls, lingering shadows creeping at the edges of my vision.
As I braced myself to ask more, the lights flickered. Jeb's face paled. "We shouldn't be talking about this," he whispered, panic flaring in his eyes. Before I could respond, he stood up abruptly. "You need to leave. It's not safe." My heart raced and fear twisted in my gut. I backed away slowly, sensing that something dark had just woken up. The moment I stepped outside, I heard the faintest whisper cut through the air. "You shouldn't have come here." I turned to run again, the lake still firmly lodged in my mind. I needed answers, but now they felt like a curse. The dark path ahead twisted with fear, and I realized some stories weren't meant to be uncovered. I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly, the weight of Jeb's words pressing on my chest. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the road. I felt the oppressive quiet of the town around me. I didn't want to go back to my empty apartment. Instead, I found myself at the town library. The building was quaint, with a cracked sign that creaked in the wind. I stepped inside, greeted by the smell of old paper and polished wood. The librarian, an elderly woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked up from her desk. Her eyes twinkled with curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked. I approached, my heart thudding. "I'm looking for anything on local legends or stories about the lake." She raised an eyebrow. "That old thing? It's got its share of tales, but—" I pressed. "I need to know more about what happens there, please." She sighed, as if considering how much to reveal. "We have some books on local history. The lake is mentioned in more than one. The effect it has on people, well, they say it's been there long before any of us." I nodded, feeling a rush of anticipation. "Can you show me?" She led me to a corner filled with thick, dusty tomes. I skimmed the shelves, searching for any mention of the lake's darker history. One book caught my eye, Whispers of Maplewood. The title seemed to call to me. With trembling hands, I pulled it from the shelf and opened it. The pages were yellowed, filled with faded photographs and stories of townsfolk. Beneath one black and white photo of the lake, a caption read, "Many come to fish, but few leave unchanged." My stomach twisted. I tried to keep reading, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" the librarian asked, her voice breaking my concentration. I closed the book abruptly. "What about this darkness? People talk about it." She frowned, her gaze darting to the window. "It's best not to dwell on those things. The lake has a way of drawing people in. Some come for solace, but they often leave with something different." I couldn't look away from her. "What do you mean?" Her lips tightened. "Some lose themselves. Others, well, they're never the same. Just be careful what you ask for." Feeling a chill run down my spine, I decided to dig deeper. I spent the next hour poring over the book and notes, uncovering snippets about strange sensations, lost fishing boats, and whispers carried by the wind. Each detail only heightened my unease. I scoured the pages until something caught my eye again. A name, one I recognized. Jeb's son. "Mark," I read aloud, the name lingering in the air as if it held its own significance. Jeb had said he didn't see what took him, but this suggested otherwise. There was more to the story, a connection I had yet to uncover. The lights in the library flickered again. I froze, glancing at the librarian, who seemed unfazed, lost in her own world. But I could feel it, a growing heaviness, as if the air had thickened, drawn taut around us. Something was pushing at the edges of my awareness. I needed to know more. I would have to confront those darker stories, promising myself that I wouldn't walk away until I found the truth. As I approached the exit, I felt a sudden rush of cold air. An urge to turn back washed over me, but I stepped outside
and shivered under the darkening sky. That was when I saw it, an outline ahead, leaning against my car. The dread from before came rushing back, but this time it felt more urgent. Whoever it was had been waiting for me. I squinted against the gloom as I approached my car, heart pounding in my chest. The figure was tall and shadowy, their features obscured. "Excuse me?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure stiffened but didn't respond. "Can I help you?" I took another cautious step. The last remnants of daylight painted the scene in shades of gray, making it hard to discern anything familiar. Slowly, the person turned, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a young man, maybe in his early 20s, with disheveled hair and haunted eyes that reminded me of Jeb. I could see that he was trembling, or maybe it was just the cold. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice unsteady. "I didn't mean to scare you. I was just looking for someone." "Who?" I felt an unsettling knot forming in my stomach. He hesitated. "Jeb? Jeb Johnson? Do you know him?" I took a step back. "Yes, I do." My mind raced with questions. "What do you want with him?" Before he could answer, a flicker of light caught my eye. The library window, still glowing faintly behind me, suddenly plunged into darkness. It was as if the entire town had answered my dread with a collective intake of breath. "Please, can we talk somewhere else?" The young man's eyes darted around, full of fear. "It's not safe here." "Not safe?" I recoiled instinctively. "Why?" He seemed to gather himself, pushing his hair back in frustration, exposing a bruise on his forehead. "Someone or something is looking for me. I need to explain. You don't understand what's happening by the lake." A chill ran down my spine. "I've heard stories." He stepped closer, urgency in his voice. "Stories don't tell the whole truth. Not about the lake. Not about Mark. Mark."
My voice dropped to a whisper, the name carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. He nodded, panic starting to seep into his gaze. Mark didn't just disappear. The air thickened once more, and the wind gusted angrily, rattling branches overhead. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get away from whatever darkness this conversation threatened to bring forward. "I have to go," I said, feigning resolve. I turned toward my car, digging out my keys. "No, you can't," he shouted, grabbing my arm. "You need to listen. Jeb sent me to find you." In that moment, the tension split like a twig beneath too much weight. I jerked my arm free, but something stemmed from his eyes. A desperate plea, a flicker of truth and madness dancing just below the surface. I needed to know more. "Wait, what did he send you to tell me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but before the words could form, a howl rose from the woods, echoing through the darkness. Every hair on my body stood on end. "Please, just listen," he cried, but the urgency in his tone was drowned out by the sound, a haunting warning from the lake behind us. Then everything went dark. The streetlights flickered and died one by one, leaving us in a fragile silence. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Come on, we need to move." The urgency in his voice pierced through my paralysis. I didn't have to think twice. Whatever was lurking in the shadows was closing in. I turned quickly, my heart racing as I stumbled forward into the empty street. The air was heavy with the pungent scent of damp earth and fear. I instinctively glanced back at the figure, who was now just a shadow, but the urgency in his voice pushed me to keep moving. "Where do we go?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from creeping into my tone. My breath came out in shaky bursts. "Follow me," he shouted, darting toward the shadowy trees lining the park. I hesitated. The darkness looming around us felt alive, watching, but there was no choice. I hurried after him, my footsteps barely echoing against the silence. As we entered the trees, the branches twisted overhead like skeletal arms, blocking out what little light was left. With every step deeper into the woods, goosebumps popped up on my skin. "What's going on? Who is Mark?" I pressed, straining to keep up with his frantic pace. "Mark was Jeb's friend," he explained, breathless. "He got too close to the truth. No one knows what happened that night by the lake, but people have been disappearing." His words hung heavy between us, filling the silence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Disappearances? Was Jeb involved? "You came looking for me because of some ghost stories." "Not just stories," he replied sharply. "There's something out there. I saw it." "Saw what?" I wasn't sure whether I wanted to know. He stopped abruptly, turning to face me. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but if Jeb sent me,
then you need to know what you're stepping into.
He glanced at the open space, as if expecting shadows to creep in. Just tell me, I urged, my impatience rising. There's a creature that comes out at night, he whispered, his intensity making my heart race more. It feeds off fear and lures people in by showing them what they most want to see. Mark thought he could conquer it. He thought he could help Jeb, but it took him, and now it's hungry for more. That chilling revelation sent shivers down my spine. You think it will come for us? He looked down, and I could see the fear buried deep in his features. I don't know, but we can't be out here, not alone. Suddenly, a rustling noise erupted from the thicket nearby. We both turned, and I could feel my heart stop. A pair of eyes glinted back at us from the darkness. Not just any eyes, something far more predatory. We need to go, I gasped, pulling him with me as I bolted. He stumbled, but quickly regained his balance as we ran further into the trees. An echoing howl erupted behind us, louder and more menacing than before. My legs burned with exertion, and the darkness closed in, shrouding our escape. Where are we going? I shouted over the noise. There's an old cabin up ahead, he yelled. We can hide there. Just as we reached a clearing, I noticed the silhouette of the cabin, worn down and barely standing. It was our only chance. But as we raced toward it, an unearthly growl erupted from the woods, shaking the ground beneath us. Go, he cried. I lunged for the door, my heart pounding, but it swung open before I reached it. And then I froze. Who are you? A low voice rumbled from inside, its outline shadowy and indistinct. The air turned icy as I flung my panicked gaze to my companion. He looked just as stricken, his eyes wide in disbelief and terror. I realized in that moment that our fight for survival had just begun. I blinked hard, trying to grasp what I was seeing. The outline inside the cabin was barely visible, a dark form against the dim light behind him. We need to get out of here, my companion said urgently, tugging on my arm. But I was rooted, unable to move. What do you want? I managed to stammer, my voice trembling. The figure inside shifted slightly, its eyes glinting like a predator's. I'm not your enemy, it said, though its tone was anything but reassuring. If you're out here, you're either brave or foolish. Which is it? Neither, my companion shot back, his voice rising in panic. Just tell us how to survive. The figure regarded us silently, its gaze flickering between us. Then listen closely. The creature you fear, it isn't the only danger in these woods. It has followers, and they won't be far behind. I felt a gut punch of terror. Followers, I echoed, looking back toward the trees as another growl echoed through the night. It was closer now. Those who worship the creature, the voice continued, almost conversationally. They've lost themselves to its lure. It feeds off fear, yes, but it also craves chaos. You must keep your wits about you. What can we do? I asked, desperation creeping into my words. First, the figure said, stepping slightly forward into the light, you need to understand it. You need to confront what it shows you. Fear isn't just an instinct, it's a weapon for that thing. The light caught his features, a rough, worn face marked by lines of experience. I can help, but you must trust me. What's your name? I managed to ask, needing to ground myself in some semblance of reality. Call me Sam, he replied, his voice steady. You only have so long before night fully descends. We don't have time for hesitation. If you want to survive this, come inside. The howl rang out again, and I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I glanced at my companion, whose face was a mixture of fear and desperation. We didn't have many options left. Okay, I said finally, my decision made. We'll trust you. As we stepped into the cabin, I could feel its weight close around us. The smell of mildew and stale wood filled the air, but it felt safer than the chilling darkness outside. Sit, Sam commanded, gesturing to a couple of creaky chairs. We obeyed without a word. You're not just running from a creature, you're running from the truth. You need to be prepared for what comes next. What truth? I asked, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. That which you long for the most could be your worst nightmare, he said, his voice gravely serious. And it will reveal itself, but you must remain calm. Clarity is your ally. Before I could respond, another howl pierced the night, louder and more furious than before.
It felt like it shook the very ground beneath us. Sam's expression darkened. "They're coming," he said, urgency heavy in his voice. "Get ready." And then everything went dark. I jolted awake, gasping for air. My surroundings felt different, the cabin now bathed in a flickering light from a small oil lamp. I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the remnants of the darkness that had engulfed me. "Are you all right?" Sam's voice pulled me from the fog. He stood near the window, peering into the night. My companion was still beside me, his eyes wide with confusion. "What happened?" I croaked, trying to refocus my thoughts. "They're searching for you," he said, lowering his voice. I wasn't sure how much time we had. "We must act fast." "Who?" I demanded, a tremble in my voice. The reality of our predicament settled heavily on my shoulders. "Followers," Sam replied, his eyes narrowing. "They've come to feed the creature. It's what they do. We need to leave this cabin and reach the river. It's our best chance." "Leave," my companion echoed, fear creeping into his voice. "We can't just go out there. What if you stay?" Sam got him off, a fierce intensity burning in his eyes. "You want to be easy prey. The longer you hesitate, the harder it will be."
I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I could faintly hear chanting outside, low and sinister. It sent chills down my spine. "What's the plan?" I finally asked, glancing at my companion, who looked between me and Sam with uncertainty. "I'll go first," Sam said. "Follow closely and don't make a sound. If they catch wind of you, it'll be over before we even reach the water." We nodded in almost unison, adrenaline sharpening my focus. As Sam creaked open the door, the sound felt deafening in the quiet of the cabin. The night air was thick with tension, the fragrant smell of moss and earth mixing with the growing scent of fear. Outside, moonlight cast eerie shadows, revealing twisted branches that seemed to reach for us. "Now," Sam whispered urgently. We slipped out, moving as stealthily as we could across the rough ground. I felt the pulse of the forest around us, alive and dangerous. Every rustle, every distant growl made my heart race. We dashed from tree to tree, doing our best to stay hidden. Panic clawed at my insides as the chanting grew more frenzied. Suddenly, I felt it, eyes watching us from the darkness. I froze, casting a glance toward my side. There was nothing behind us, but in front, something was emerging. "Keep moving," Sam hissed. His eyes were wide, scanning the shadows. Then a figure materialized just ahead of us, a silhouette of a person draped in dark, tattered cloth. "Stop," the figure commanded. "You can't escape." Before I could respond, Sam pushed me forward, and we stumbled deeper into the woods. Each footfall felt heavier than the last as the air thickened with their words, echoes growing louder, angry, and filled with intent. "Why can't we escape?" I shouted back, struggling to understand, but the ominous figure only grinned, revealing a row of sharp teeth. That's when I saw it, the true horror behind the figure, emerging from the tree line. A monstrous shape loomed, its eyes glowing. "Run!" Sam shouted again as the ground shook beneath us. I didn't know where we were headed, but I felt the urgency like fire in my veins, and as we sprinted through the nightmare, I was filled with only one thought. Whatever had been waiting for us in the darkness was now free, and it was coming for us. The forest around us was alive with chaos. The sound of twigs snapping and our frantic breaths filled my ears. Sam led the way, his figure darting between trees like a shadow. I followed, my legs fueled by fear. There was no time for questions. The only thought in my mind was survival. Suddenly, the chanting swelled, echoing like a sinister melody, and I could feel it in my bones. I glanced back, and for a split second, I saw the figure again, the tattered cloth billowing like a dark flag in the night. It wasn't just one figure anymore. More emerged from the shadows, closing in. "Faster," Sam urged, glancing over his shoulder. I could see the panic in his eyes. The glow from the creature's eyes intensified, revealing a monstrous form, massive and grotesque. It wasn't just a wild animal. It was something else, something I couldn't comprehend. We broke through a thicket and found ourselves at the riverbank. The water glimmered under the moonlight, cold and inviting. Fear drove me forward, but as I reached the edge, I hesitated. "Now what?" my companion asked, chest heaving. "We wade through," Sam replied, urgency in his voice. "It's our only way across." But I trailed off, uncertainty swirling inside me. The river looked treacherous, the current more powerful than I remembered. The last thing I wanted was to drown,
but there was no choice. The figures were gaining on us. "Jump!" Sam shouted, moving into the water. I followed, adrenaline pushing me forward despite the icy shock. The water curled around me, pulling with all its might. We fought against the current, each stroke feeling like a battle. I risked a glance back. The figures stood at the water's edge, their chanting hissing through the air. The monstrous figure loomed behind them, its eyes locked onto us. With each step we took, we could hear the roar of the crowd grow louder, the sounds melding into a deafening chant. Just as I made it to the center of the river, I felt something brush past my leg. I gasped, my body instinctively tensing. I braced myself and kept moving. Sam was ahead, his form steadily cutting through the water, but the current was pulling me under. I fought to keep my head above the surface. "Help!" I shouted, panic rising. My heart pounded as the weight of the water threatened to drag me down. "Hold on!" Sam yelled back. He turned, reaching for me. The moment our hands clasped was a surge of hope, but also desperation. Just then I saw a flash behind him, a dark shape spilling into the river. "Sam, watch out!" I warned, but it was too late. The creature lunged at him, its massive jaws opening wide. I watched in horror as Sam was pulled under. The water exploded into a flurry of splashes, and I felt the current pulling me away from him. I couldn't think, I could only act. I turned and swam for the nearest bank, desperation guiding my movements. I clawed my way onto the shore, my body trembling. I looked back, still gasping for air, my heart racing as I searched the water for any sign of Sam. That's when I saw it, the eerie silhouettes emerging from the river's edge, chanting louder than before. They weren't just followers anymore. They had transformed, their eyes glinting with madness. And then, suddenly, the chanting stopped. An unsettling silence enveloped me, and I could feel the weight of their gaze. A sense of dread washed over me as realization set in. This was only the beginning. The chill of the night was suffocating. I stumbled away from the river, my heart racing and my mind racing faster. Sam was gone, swallowed by the darkness.
I couldn't linger by the riverbank, not with the figures watching me, their faces lost in shadows. I ran. My shoes sank into the soft earth, and every step was a reminder of the danger lurking just behind. The silence that had settled was more unsettling than the chanting had been. It felt like they were waiting. I darted into the trees, hoping to lose myself in the darkness. The forest was a tangled maze, branches snatching at my clothes, thick bushes blocking my path. The only sound was my urgent breathing and the rush of the river fading behind me. I looked back once, panic flaring as I thought I saw movement among the trees, but I couldn't afford to stop. After what felt like an eternity, I reached a small clearing. The moon broke through the clouds, illuminating my surroundings. I could barely catch my breath. Just as I felt a hint of safety, I heard a rustle behind me. My heart skipped. I turned, ready to run again. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. My muscles tightened as I prepared for a confrontation. But it wasn't the monstrous creature. It was a person, a woman with wild, tangled hair and eyes that glowed softly like embers. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I hesitated, confusion mixing with fear. "They'll come for you too. You have to listen." "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Are you with them?" "No, I'm not. Please, I've been hiding." She stepped closer, revealing a mark on her arm, an angry red symbol that looked almost like a brand. It sent chills down my spine. "They took my brother. You have to believe me." I was torn. Trusting her felt risky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both trapped in the same nightmare. "What do you know about them?" "The figures. They're not just people," she said urgently, glancing over her shoulder. "They were once like us. Now they serve the creature, a darkness that hungers." A shiver crawled down my back. I thought of Sam, of what that creature might have done to him. "We have to find help. No one can help us," she said, fear choking her words. "If we're seen." Before she could finish, the sound of chanting echoed through the trees again, closer this time. I could feel the vibrations in my bones. Panic surged. "We can't stay here," I insisted, glancing around for an escape. As I turned to leave the clearing, the woman's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Wait," she shouted, desperation in her voice. "You need to know where to go. There's a place in the forest, a sanctuary that might protect us, but it won't be easy to reach." I looked into her eyes, now wide with urgency. "What must we do?" Before she could respond, a sound like twigs snapping pierced the air. I felt dread wash over me. Someone or something was coming. "Follow me," she said, her grip tightening on my wrist. Without another thought, I sprinted into the depths of the forest with her, worried about what shadows were trailing us. Just as I felt hope again, everything went dark. The world slipped away in an instant. I had no idea what was waiting for us in the darkness. I awoke on the damp ground, disoriented and breathing heavily.
My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I pushed myself up, scanning my surroundings. The woman who had pulled me away was beside me, her expression tense. "We need to move," she urged, urgency coating her voice. "What happened?" I croaked, still grasping for reality, my fingers brushing against the cool earth. "Something took us," she said, fear flickering in her eyes. "It's worse than I thought. Whatever they're summoning is powerful." "Summoning?" I tried to grasp the implications. "What do you mean?" She stood, glancing around as if expecting to see shadows looming around us. "The figures have gathered. They want to strengthen the hold of the creature. It feeds off fear, and they're both its followers and its prey." I struggled to stand. "Then we have to get out. Where's the sanctuary?" "Follow me," she urged, her voice almost breaking. "It's deeper in the woods. It's our only hope." We plunged into the forest, pushing through the dense underbrush. The air was thick and charged, each rustle making my heart race. I knew they were close. The chanting was rising again, echoing through the trees, a haunting symphony that curled its fingers around my throat. As we moved, I caught glimpses of the figures through the branches, shadowy forms drifting between the trees, whispering words that curled around us like smoke. "Keep going," she hissed, and I felt my resolve strengthened, although fear gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. Suddenly, a figure stepped directly into our path, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You cannot escape us." Its voice was like gravel, words slithering through the air with a chilling taunt. The woman drew a breath. "We have to go around," she urged, turning to retreat. But just as we turned, more figures emerged, blocking every escape route. Panic set in as I realized the darkness was closing in. "No, stay back," the woman shouted, and I felt her hand tighten around mine as we pressed against the oncoming shadows. "Give yourself willingly, or suffer the consequences," another voice chimed, dripping with malice. I felt the despair rising. I pulled at her hand. "We need to find a way through," I whispered urgently. But just as we tried to slip away, another shriek blasted through the air, a chilling howl that seemed to reverberate through the trees. "I don't know if we can fight them," I said, dread coiling in my gut. "We can't fight what's waiting back there," she replied, glancing over her shoulder. "We must confront the fear rather than running from it. You have to trust me." I was losing my grip on reality, my mind buzzing with terror. "What do you mean?" "Confront it," she insisted again. "Face the darkness. It thrives on our fears."
The chanting grew louder, the figures closing in, their forms twisting and shifting unnaturally. I felt a pull towards them, an urge connecting my fear to their very presence, as if they fed off my dread. "Trust me," she repeated, her eyes pleading. "Think of what terrifies you the most. We use it against them." Desperation filled my veins. I don't know." The figures advanced, their whispers slicing through the air. "Embrace it," they whispered. "Join us." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to confront the shadows of my past, the darkness that had haunted me long before this night. Faces of regret and dread flashed through my mind, lost moments, lost chances, the fear of the unknown. Suddenly, I felt something shift within me, a surge of strength ignited by defiance rather than fear. I opened my eyes, looking at the figures with newfound conviction. "No, you can't take me." The woman echoed my declaration, raising her arms as if to shield me. Something shimmered in the air between us, a barrier born from the purity of our determination. The shadows recoiled, a chorus of hisses filling the air as they recoiled from the light. "We have power together," she shouted, her voice ringing out like a clarion call, igniting resolve in my chest. Channeling every ounce of defiance, I pressed forward. "You're nothing! We won't be consumed!" With those words, the air ignited around us, and the figures screeched, retreating into the darkness. The night twisted into chaos, shadows scattering into the trees, while a glowing force pulsed around us. But just as suddenly as they had receded, the chaos stopped. An eerie silence settled. The air felt different, charged, alive. "What just happened?" I gasped, my breathing ragged. "I don't know, but it bought us time," she said, hope flickering in her eyes. "We need to find the sanctuary now, before they regroup." We turned back to the path ahead, moving with purpose. But as we pressed forward, I felt the echoes of the night's terror lingering at the edges of my awareness. Was it really over? Could we escape? "What about Sam?" I asked, as we quickened our pace, a fresh wave of concern crashing over me. The woman's expression fell. "That creature, once it has its hold, it's hard to break.
I felt crushed by uncertainty. "We have to find him," I insisted, my heart aching. But a lingering dread tightened within me, a realization that some truths might remain unsaid. Deeper into the forest we fled, toward an uncertain sanctuary and a past filled with shadows. As we ran, I couldn't shake the thought, even if we escaped the darkness, would we ever truly be free? I realized then that I might never find the answers I desperately sought, but I knew one thing for sure. I would fight as long as I could. We were still alive, and for now, that was enough.